J. Warner Wallace is a cold case homicide detective who's been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Dateline, and Court TV. Now, we join him as he applies his investigative skills to making a case for Christianity.
All right, with the next speaker that we have, we are so excited. He is a former homicide cold case detective from Los Angeles who was an atheist, much like Pagan Bob, who loved to chide Christians and put them on the spot and prove that their beliefs were untrue. But then he realized that he had never put the claims of Christianity through the same filter of forensic evidence that he did when he was solving his cold cases. So when he did that, guess what happened? He became a Christian. And so I'd like to introduce, how many of you saw God's Not Dead too? Okay, well then you know him already because he was the expert witness that testified to the truth of the Gospels. So please give a warm welcome to J. Warner Wallace.
Thank you, appreciate it. You guys did really well. Actually, I thought you did well. And we do these role plays Brett and I live about 10 minutes from each other, and I consider him to be one of my best friends for the last 15 years or so. And I think the last time we saw each other was when in August we were together with you, Elisa, and I tell you, we decided we wanted to get together again, so we flew out to Tennessee, although we're only about 10 minutes apart. What I'm gonna try to do with you tonight is to help you answer, at least in your own head, some of those questions that he raised. But I actually thought, listening in the back, and I listened to all of it, I thought you guys did great. And what I mean is we get in a lot of settings where audiences don't do nearly as well. And I thought he was really sweet. I did, because he is a very nice guy. And I was always much more obnoxious as an unbeliever than Brett, and I would push. And so I just think you guys actually did pretty well. But if you feel like you can take a step, and I know you can, that's what we want to do this weekend with you guys. Now, my name is Jim Wallace. I've been working in Los Angeles County for about 25 years, working primarily unsolved murders. I still consult with the DA's office. I've got a couple of cases that are still active. And I can tell you that you learn things working these cases that I never thought I would ever apply to Christianity, because I wasn't raised in a Christian home. I didn't have family members who were Christians who could model Christianity for me. And I certainly didn't know any Christians who could answer the questions. You guys did a lot better than my friends who were police officers when I would ask them questions about, why do you think this is true? And I can tell you that these guys were all committed evidentialists about their professional work. Give me 5 reasons why this is our guy. Oh, I can give you 5. I can give you 25 reasons why this is our guy. Give me 5 reasons why you believe the Bible's reliable. Couldn't do that. Really? The other form of, I knew 2 different kinds of Christians in those days. Those were the police officers I knew. The other group I knew were the people we were taking to jail, because most of those folks were also claimed to be Christians. So I thought, if that's what you gotta be, somebody who doesn't really use their mind, or somebody who doesn't act like they use their mind, I don't want any part of it. So I was not interested in Christianity. But I did begin to take a look at it, because my wife was more interested than I was. And we had been together 18 years before I ever stepped foot in an evangelical church of any kind. Now, today, my son is doing the same work that I did for years before him. I'm not very creative. I gave him my name. His name is Jim Wallace. And he's using the same tools that I used before him at the same agency that I worked at before him. And I'm not very creative either. My dad gave me his name. He worked at the same agency also. So since 1961, we've been at the same agency doing this work. And you learn things that I'm going to transfer to you tonight. So if you've got an interest in how we do police work, I'm going to try to give you several tools you can use to apply toward the examination of God's existence and whether or not you can trust what the Bible says about Jesus. We're going to use those this weekend. Now, I have a website. I'm just going to point you to it, because I believe it or not, although we write books, that's what we do. I'm not here to sell you a book. I mean, you can ask anybody I've worked with here. I hate selling books. I hate it. I'm going to give them to you as about what I pay for them, because I just want to get rid of them, okay? I think they're good books, but as an atheist, I hated Christians who were always selling something. And now, years later, God has got a funny sense of humor. I'm a Christian who's selling something. So what I try to do is give you a free resource. Now, we have a phone app, or all the stuff on our website is available for free, and you can go there to get all that, but I'm gonna send you everything we talk about tonight, plus about 80% more. I'm gonna send you through a link the video of the entire presentation. I'm only gonna show you 20% of it here tonight, but you're gonna get all of it. I'm gonna send it to you as a video. I'm gonna send you the PDF files. I'm gonna send you the MP3s. I wanna make sure you have the tools you need to go another step. And if you need to reach me, you can always do it on social media. Twitter is where I usually hang out most of the time to be reached. And tonight what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at a book I wrote called God's Crime Scene, because it talks about how we could examine the universe like a crime scene to determine who is the suspect who left this evidence. So we're gonna go through what I call Death Investigations 101 from a different book. This is our code book we use of criminal investigations. And we're gonna teach you how to work death scenes, because if you learn how to work a death scene, you could probably examine the evidence in the universe, believe it or not. So we're gonna show you a death scene. You ready? Dead guy lying on the floor. Looks suspiciously like my son, but pay no attention to that. So far, we have to figure out what kind of death is this? Not every death is one that I'm interested in working. I only work homicides. There are 4 ways to die, only one is criminal. I couldn't care less about the other 3. Sorry. I get to go home if you die one of the other 3 ways. I hope it's one of the other 3. But I gotta figure out which it is. Here, I look at evidence. I do this by examining the evidence in the room and then trying to infer to the most reasonable conclusion. Here, the only evidence I have is a dead guy laying face down. That's not a lot. So the question is, how do I explain dead guys who are laying face down? Well, I make 2 lists. I make a list of all the evidence in the room, and then I make a list of the ways you explain the evidence in the room. Both these lists begin with an E. It makes it easy. So what do I have in the room so far? Well, I got a dead guy laying face down. How do I explain that? Well, there's only 4 ways to die, and here they are. You can die by way of natural causes. You can die by some form of accident. You can commit suicide, or you can be murdered by somebody else. These are the ways people die. I got to figure out which matches what I have in the room. So far, based on what you have, which would you say I could cross out? If I can cross out any of these, which can I cross out right now? Go ahead, this is the audience participation part of the evening, so yell it out. Natural? Well, if he had a heart attack, he would look like that, wouldn't he? If he accidentally took too many pills, he would look like that. If he intentionally took too many pills, if I gave him too many pills, you see, I can't really cross out anything here. Give him what I have. So let's change the scenario slightly. What if he is a dead guy laying in the room, face down, but he's in a pool of his own blood, center torso? Does that change? Ooh, who said ooh? I should have beheaded him right away. But I didn't do that. So I now have an additional piece of evidence. I have blood pool in the room, center torso. Can I explain that somehow? Let's pick that on the wall. We'll put that on our evidence list, another piece of evidence. Can I cross out anything now? What can I cross out? Natural? What if you had like a brain aneurysm, hits the deck and he bleeds out through his nose? Happens every day. Well, if that happened, the blood would not be around his center torso, would it? It'd be around his head. Where can you naturally bleed from in center torso? I think it's reasonable now to cross out natural death. Now, is it still possible that he died Sure. Because anything is possible. We don't care about possible. We only care about reasonable. Keep that in mind, folks. The standard of proof is not beyond a possible doubt, because you'd never know anything if your standard of proof was beyond a possible doubt. The standard of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. You can start your car tomorrow morning and have a blow up in your driveway. That's possible. But I bet you're gonna start your car tomorrow, aren't you? Because it's not reasonable. If you lived on possible fears, you'd never move. You'd stay in bed, but the bed might catch fire. See the problem? Can I cross out anything else? I can cross out natural. Can I cross out anything else? Accidental? How would I know? I need to roll him over, don't I, to see what the injury is before I can, maybe he fell on something, I don't know. So I really can't cross out anything else. Let's change the scenario. What if I have a dead guy laying in the center of the room, pool of blood under his body, and this time I've added another dimension. He has got a gunshot wound. Center torso, it's gonna come out his back. I got a pistol laying in the room with a single casing. Let's put that in place. There it is. That is an exit wound, as you can see from this diagram. So let's add those to our list of evidences. Can I cross out anything? Can I cross out accidental? I mean, he's cleaning his gun, doesn't know it's loaded, he shoots himself. It's an exit wound. Can't cross out accidental. Can't cross out suicide. I've seen that before. Can't cross out, I'm still stuck, right? Let's change the scenario. What if in addition to all of this, I had a suicide note laying next to the body? There it is. Does that change anything? Let's go ahead and look at our list. I think I can cross out accidental now, don't you? He's got a suicide note. I mean, maybe he didn't intend to kill himself quite that fast, but that was an accident before he intended to kill himself, but he's got a suicide note. So now are we convinced this is a suicide? There's a suicide note. No. You guys have been watching Criminal Minds. Is that popular here in Tennessee? All right, let me see if I can convince you further. What if we did DNA on that note and we discovered that it doesn't have his DNA or his fingerprints, or it's not in his handwriting, it's not his paper. It's not even a pen no one's ever seen with this guy. And not only that, what if he had multiple gunshot wounds on his back and they were entry wounds? Still skeptical? What if there was bloody footprints leading out of the room? Let's do that right now. You can tell that I think Brett would be my first suspect there in Southern California there. He's going surfing. So let's add those pieces of evidence. These are now exit wounds rather, instead of entry wounds. They're entry wounds rather than exit wounds, sorry. Got foreign fingerprints there and bloody footprints. Now, when I add this to my evidence list, I think it's pretty compelling that I can now rule out suicide. Kind of hard to shoot yourself in the back multiple times and then walk out of the room in your own blood. So now I have a good reasonable inference that this is a homicide, because I have looked at the evidence in the room and asked myself, how do I explain? This is called abductive reasoning. We're going to do this tomorrow in our talk on the resurrection. But before we get to that, there's another little trick here that I observed years ago, and when I started to teach it to my coworkers, it made these investigations much faster. Here's the trick. You ready? Simple investigative trick. If you can explain everything that's in the room by staying in the room, it's probably not a homicide. Pretty simple. If you can explain the stuff that's in the room by staying in the room, it's not a homicide. Let me make it clear for you visually. Let's make the room clear. Let's go ahead and shrink him down and put him in a box that we'll call the room. Okay, so here he is in the room. Now here's our challenge. Can we explain the stuff in the room by staying inside the room, or do we have to go outside the room to explain it? In other words, if I can explain it by staying inside, for example, let's say that note. Well, it turns out that's his handwriting on his paper with his pen. Only his fingerprints are on it. Well, he can do that by himself alone in the room. I can explain that by staying in the room. And if, for example, people say, well, that's his gun. He's owned it for years. It's registered to him. He keeps it in a safe in the room. I don't even need that now. I can explain that by staying in the room. And anyone can shoot themselves one time. I can explain that without anybody else having to be, he can do that by himself in the room. Now, if this is the case, and I can explain everything that's in the room by staying in the room, it's going to be one of these three. Clearly, it's not going to be a natural in this case, but it's going to be an accidental or a suicide. On the other hand, if I can't explain this by staying in the room, if I have to go outside for the best explanation, everything changes. So, for example, if those aren't his fingerprints, they're somebody else's fingerprints. He doesn't even own any paper. I can't find any matching paper in the room. I can't find a pen that matches that. And it's an unknown. Nobody even knows that those fingerprints don't match anyone who's ever been in the house. I got a problem. The best explanation is now outside the room. And similarly, if the gun's not registered to him, and people say he's afraid of guns, he have never owned a gun. You kidding me? He would never touch a gun. And it's unregistered. And there's fingerprints and DNA on the gun that don't belong to him. Best explanations outside the room. Kind of hard to shoot yourself multiple times in the back. Better explanations are outside the room. Not only that, I got bloody footprints leading out of the room. Come on, better explanations outside the room. Now I've explained the evidence, but I had to go outside the room to explain it. That changes everything. Now this option is available to me because why? I just played this little game of inside or outside the room, and I know now I have an intruder. And intruders change everything. Intruders are the very thing that turn death scenes into crime scenes. I can have a death scene, but if I've got evidence I can only explain my gospel, and I got a crime scene I got to work. And you might be curious as to why somebody would kill themselves or how they could die accidentally. You might have a certain sense of curiosity, but once you have evidence of an intruder, you better change that sense of curiosity into a sense of urgency. Because the only show on TV that really is close to what we do is called The First 48. Because they really are following cops around, and in the first 48 hours, you get your best chance of making progress on any homicide. That's why when you start a homicide that was done in 1979, you're kind of behind the curve. And I'll show you one of those tonight. So I thought to myself, as a guy who was looking at the Gospels and starting to think that they might be telling me the truth about Jesus, the problem I had with the Gospels was the supernatural elements in the Gospels. So I said, I got to stop and examine my own beliefs about the universe. And I thought to myself, could I work the universe the same way I work crime scenes? And in other words, could I take this room, the room of the natural universe, look at all the evidence that's in the room and ask the simple question, can I explain the evidence in the room by staying in the room? If I can, then my form of naturalism, evolutionary processes, physics, chemistry will take care of it, because that stuff's already in the room. Space, time, matter, physics, chemistry, that's all that's in the room. If I can explain everything in the room with just those elements, I'm good to go. Now, there are 8 things in the room that I think we have to explain. Now, I think you could do more than 8, but I've chosen these 8 because I think they're pretty indicative. Are you ready? Pretty simple. Here they are. The first is we happen to be in a room that has a beginning. We're in a universe that came into existence from nothing. All space, time, and matter did not exist until the beginning of the universe. You mean there was a space and stuff started to pop into existence? No, no space. Space is not nothing. Space is something. There was nothing, and then there was everything. Space is not something? I mean, space is something? Well, I don't get that. So if space is something, what is nothing? It's what Aristotle said. Nothing is what rocks dream about. Nothing. Got it? Not only that, the universe that we happen to live in, it seems to be fine-tuned for the existence of biological organisms like you and I. It doesn't have to be this way. And the cosmological constants are so crazily fine-tuned on a hair, it's a razor's edge, that any slight variation, the entire universe would collapse upon itself. Why is it so finely tuned when even physicists, atheist physicists, say it does not need to be this way? This fine-tuning problem has to be explained. And tonight we're going to talk about 2 pieces of biological evidence. We happen to have life that came into existence from nothing, from non-life. Inorganic material came to life. And when it did come to life, it shows signs of design. How do we explain these things? Not only that, you're thinking about this right now. What are you using to think with this? Are you using your brain? Or are you using your mind? Mind? You think you have a mind? As an atheist, I was willing to give you a brain, but you don't have a mind. In a physical, material universe, there are no immaterial, non-physical entities like minds or souls or angels or demons or ghosts in the machine. You have brain function. You don't have thoughts come from mind. This is called the problem of mind by philosophers, but we got to explain where minds come from and why it is you seem to have the freedom to make choices which wouldn't be available to you if all you had were physical processes in your brain. Because physical processes involve what's called event causation. Like dominoes falling, domino one falls against the other, your neurons are transferring information one against the other, and you don't make free choices. Dominoes don't make decisions. Dominoes just fall when they're nudged. That's what your thoughts are. They just fall when they're nudged, which means you have no control over your thoughts. And the atheist philosopher neuroscientist, Sam Harris, says that your freedom is an illusion. You have no control over your thoughts. At least he's honest. As an atheist, he has to say that. But you think you have control over your thoughts. How do we explain that? Not only that, we are in a universe that has objective, transcendent moral truths. And you did a good job talking about those with Brett, trying to nudge those out of him, right? You do have objective. It's never okay to torture babies for the fun of it. It never will be. It's not just a matter of one tribe disagreeing with another tribe or one nation. It's never going to be okay to do that. Some might do it, but it wouldn't be okay. And if there's a Star Trek universe and there are Klingons and Romulans, it wouldn't be okay to torture Klingon and Romulan babies either. This is a law that transcends not only species, but planets. What is the objective source of a transcendent law? And we have evil and injustice in the world. We've got to explain it. Everyone's got to explain it. I think these 8 things have to be explained in the universe. The only question is, can I explain them with just the space, time, matter, physics, and chemistry that are available to me inside the room? And if I can't do that, if I have to go outside the room for the best explanation, well, then I got a problem, because I got evidence of an intruder at the cosmic level. And that's why I wrote this book called God's Crime Scene. Not because I'm saying that God committed a crime. I'm saying you could simply work the universe like a crime scene. And if you did, you discover a suspect. We take the same approach we do at crime scenes, make a list of evidence and a list of explanations, and we turn our sights on the universe and make a list of evidence and a list of explanations. The evidence of these 8 things we just talked about. And there's only 2 ways to explain those 8 things. Either we stay inside the room and then some form of unguided natural processes, only guided by law, or we go outside the room to a free agent who can design freely. Which is more reasonable? And tonight we're just going to go through 2 of them. And very briefly on top of it all, I teach this course at Biola, and it takes me 17 hours to go through these 8 things. So we're not going to do all 8 things. We're not even going to do 2 things all that well, but we're going to try. I had a crime a number of years ago in which a guy was killed about 2 days or 3 days before New Year's Eve. And boy, did that make us mad, right? Because we get there and we're thinking, as soon as I show us, man, there goes the holiday. We're done. We're going to be here for a week on this thing. He was killed in his business, and laying next to his body was a cell phone from a woman with a message. And when I saw the cell phone, I thought, what is this message? Is that information from this woman named Rachel? Did she butt dial that? Is that a malfunction of the phone? Is it really information, or is it just data? What is it? And does it matter? It turned out it did matter, because she had been cheating on her husband for a number of years, and she told her boyfriend that this year she wanted her husband dead before the end of the year, and the boyfriend had waited all year long, and now we're 2 days before the end of the year. She's getting impatient. So he says, I'm going to go do it tonight. He texts her and says, well, it's the holiday season. It's slow. I'm coming home early. She didn't want him to come home early. So she texted this message. And when I did a search warrant on her records, I found that she did this quite often. This simply says, I will be there in 30 minutes. This froze him in place, thinking she would be there in 30 minutes. 10 minutes later, the boyfriend showed up and killed him. So she just simply used the text, this information, to commit the crime. Make sense? Determining that this was information and not a butt dial made all the difference in the case. And it turns out there's a piece of information in the universe that makes all the difference in the case when it comes to the origin of life. And you already know that. You started to talk about it in the Q&A. It is this amazing molecule called DNA. The nucleotides in DNA are in a certain order. There are 4. There's a 5th one in RNA. And these nucleotides are in a particular order in the chain. And that order, believe it or not, is information. It's the largest data stream of information ever discovered by man. And it is in a molecule in your body. What's fascinating about it for me as an investigator is simply this, and it was said best by Stephen C. Meyer, who is a philosopher of science. He put it this way in a book. He said, there isn't a single example anywhere in the history of science or in the history of the universe in which information has ever come from anything other than intelligence. If the stuff in DNA is information, it must be attributed to intelligence. You can't get it from physics. You can't get them from random chance. Only intelligent minds account for information. And that's why the scientific community that are not believers has been spending so much time trying to redefine what information is. Because if that's information, we got a problem. That's information, we now know we have a source. We have to have a source for this. I want to teach you about information. When I go to the chalkboard, I'm going to be showing you images from the book. My bachelor's degree, I wasn't going to be a cop. I was going to be a designer. That was my whole dream, right? So I have a bachelor's degree in design, and I have a master's degree in architecture from UCLA. That's actually a degree. And then I left at 27 and I became a police officer. But the point is, I get to draw my own illustrations in my books. So it's fun. Here's one from the book. I want to quote a guy named Dr. Werner Gitt, who is a German he's not really an information scientist, he's an engineer. But he has studied information and he has written a book in which he describes the 5 levels of information. If you're trying to go to sleep and you can't sleep, get this book. It'll put you to sleep. But I found a way to contextualize it. I think it'll help you, okay? I'm gonna pitch it to you through my favorite dog I've ever owned. You guys own dogs, right? Does anybody here own a Welsh Pembroke Corgi? Okay, then all your dogs are loser dogs, okay? Because this dog right here, the queen has 4 of those for a reason. That's the best dog that ever lived. And of all Pembroke Welsh Corgis, that's the best Corgi that ever lived right there. Her name is Bailey. Now, if I was to give Bailey a typewriter and then tell Bailey that anything you type, I will go ahead and put on the wall, I'll chalk it out, and I give her a chance to start typing with those little legs she has, it's not gonna be very pretty. So her first effort looks like this. Okay, great. What is Bailey telling me? Is that information? Actually, it is information in a sense. It is. It's very complex, and if I asked her to type that again, the odds are pretty good she wouldn't be able to do it. But it's not specific in the sense that I don't know what she means. So it's kind of a form of information, but not quite. Is this what DNA is? No. This is the lowest level of information. What if I could convince Bailey, she's so smart, I trained her, she can type one key and the space bar over and over again. TT space, TT space, TT space, there it is. Now I've got a pattern, a very rigid pattern, a simple pattern, but it's a pattern. Would you say now that Bailey's smart? Yeah, if she could do that, she'd be smart. Is that information though? Well, in a sense it is. It's more specific now, but I have no meaning still. What does it mean? What if I could teach her to type patterns that are a little more complex, like this one, T13T spacebar, over and over and over again? Now this is a really smart dog, but is that information? Is that what DNA is? No, that's not what DNA is. That's the lowest level of information. This is information that's called statistics. And physics can get you this. Physics and chance in the raw universe, using nothing more than the laws of physics and chance, can get you all 3 of these lines. So if this is what DNA is, then physics can get us. We can stay inside the room for an answer. But this is not what DNA is. Let's go one more level. What if Bailey could type this? Now she can form words, but she seems to have them kind of in the wrong order. What does Bailey mean here? I don't know, but she can form words. That's not bad. If a dog could do that, you'd be flipping out, right? This is another level of information. This is called cosyntax. Is DNA like this? No. DNA is more sophisticated than this. Much more sophisticated than this. And by the way, we're already outside of what physics or chance can get you, because physics and chance can't even get you this. It could get you that. What if Bailey could do this? She can type a sentence with words in the right order that has meaning. Grandpa's eating. Not bad. Would you agree that's pretty good? Now, I have known people, by the way, this is another level of information. It is called semantics. I have known people who've been stuck between cosyntax and semantics. They're learning a new language and they get the words, but not quite sure what order to put them in. You know what I'm talking about? I was at a restaurant in Malibu, California. I went in the washroom. This is the sign that was hanging in the washroom. It said, "Please do not throw paper wiping hand down a toilet." Okay? So here's a guy who clearly is stuck somewhere between level 2 and 3. Not bad. Is this, though, what DNA is? Actually, no. DNA is more sophisticated than that. Crazy, I know. What if Bailey could not only send me a sentence, write me a sentence, but she could ask something. She could make a request. Oh my gosh. That's a whole nother level of information. Making requests. Feed me. Let's eat. That is a huge jump in knowledge. Huge jump. That is what we call, number 4, pragmatics. Very practical. When you ask, and if you expect Grandpa to get off his behind and feed her, if she's asking that question, expecting him to meet the demand, that's a whole nother level of information. That is called apobetics. Got it? Now, how do you tell the difference between the lowest forms of information? By the way, DNA is at this level. The highest level of information. I'll tell you what I mean. to compare the lowest level with the highest level, we know something quite right away. Number one, the top level, what is she saying to us? I don't know. Bottom level, what is she saying? We know. Top level, if I take one character and remove it, would it change its meaning? No. If I pull that character out, it still makes no sense. I cannot destroy the meaning by removing a character at the lowest level of information. But I think you know where I'm going with this, don't you? Because commas do save lives. Here we go. Now, if at this level of information, I make a one character change in the same way, something changes in the meaning, right? Now, sweet Bailey who wants to get fed is now evil Bailey who wants to eat grandpa. See the difference? Meaning is changed at the highest level by small iterations, by small mutations. So when I come to say this is either Billy the Kid or Jesse Gibbs, I can't remember who it is, but whoever it is, here he is. Here's his DNA information, the information that guides his form, that guides who he is. Everything about Jesse or Billy, whoever this is guided and written in his DNA. Let's take and make small changes. Here, for example, we'll change one nucleotide right here. If we were to do that, now I'm going to tell you, DNA is so sophisticated that it has an error reduction code. In other words, in small changes, it's actually programmed in advance to make the modifications. But we do gene therapy, and I have one son who's a med student and one son who's a police officer. He did gene therapy on kidney cysts for a long time because they're trying to change the DNA information to get rid of the cyst. Why? Because a small change in the DNA is going to result in some physical change in Billy or Jesse, whoever this is. Got it? That's why we know this is the highest level of information. It is a message sent to the organism with the expectation that request will be fulfilled. This is epibetics. The highest level, you cannot get it, and they know it. So let's go back to Paul. Paul says it this way. We're still left with the mystery of where biological information comes from. If the normal laws of physics can't inject information, if we're ruling out miracles, and of course he would because he's an atheist, he's an agnostic, then how can life be predetermined and inevitable rather than a freak accident? How is it possible to generate random complexity and specificity together in a law-like manner? We'll always come back to that basic paradox. No kidding. If we're going to stay inside the room, we only have a couple of choices. One, we can say, does life come about? Do we get DNA by chance? Well, that doesn't work. There's not enough time in the history of the universe to get us the simplest DNA. And if we're saying it's law, it's some form of physics, well, we've been looking for that. What laws of physics order the nucleotides? They cannot think of a single one because there's no example anywhere. You can ask them, give me an example anywhere where physics has ever produced information, especially high levels of information. Now, of course, we're trying to do this. We're offering these two answers because we're making an effort to stay inside the room of the universe, but these don't work. And they don't work for obvious reasons. There are chicken and egg problems. I don't know if I've ever thought about it. You cannot get a protein without a ribosome machine, but you can't get a ribosome machine without a protein, because they're made out of proteins. You can't get proteins to survive without cell membranes, but cell membranes are made by proteins. You're not going to solve the chicken and egg problems with all this nonsense about chance. And you can't find any evidence of any system that'll get you there by physics. Now, there's a third way to get this. It might just be DNA information. It might just be truly information from an intelligent source, but if you do that, now you got to jump outside the room because you don't have an intelligent source in the room that can get it for you. You need a divine, cosmic, transcendent, objective source of information. Now, when we study these kinds of cases, any kind of crime scene, we ask the same questions that your old English teachers used to ask you to answer in any essay they ever asked you to write. Remember those questions? They say, write this question and answer, write this paper and answer these questions when you write the paper. And people who have been studying the origin of life have been answering these questions and trying to, what is life? And where on the universe, where on Earth, under the tectonic plates, in the oceans, in the atmosphere, where could it originate? Why did that happen? When did it happen in history? These are all great questions, but I'll tell you something right now. If I only asked these questions in a murder investigation, nobody would ever go to jail. Because there's an important question missing here. It's the who question. And by the way, if you're studying origin of life and you refuse to ask a who question, you're never going to get a good answer. That's why they don't have any good answers. They don't want to ask a who, because a who would have to be a who. Werner Gitt puts it this way. He says, look, a necessary requirement for generating meaningful information is the ability to select from alternatives. And this requires an intelligent volitional entity. Unguided, random processes cannot do this. Not in any amount of time. Because this selection process demands continuous guidance by intelligent beings that have a purpose. No kidding. If there is an intelligent being outside the room that has a purpose and is the source, is, how shall I put it, is the author of life. Gee, where had I heard that before? Let me think. Then that would explain it. Let's take a look at one more piece tonight, then I'll send you the rest. We actually see, though, the appearance of design in biological organisms. We see it. As crazy as that sounds. I think I have video coming up here that has audio, so get ready back there. You ready? I told you I'd warn you, so.
Friday, a sister's murder unsolved.
My life has never, ever been the same.
Now, detectives turn back the clock.
That ghost of this scene was still there.
And a cold case becomes a new mystery. Dateline, don't watch alone.
Okay, I don't believe in ghosts, okay? Before anyone says, oh, you said a ghost of the scene. No, what I meant to say, really, I didn't want to say it that way it was, is that when our officers first got there in 1979 and they arrived on the scene, it was still warm from the fight. It was still humid in the air from the fight. And this woman was killed in a small attached garage studio. This is the garage over here. This was the front slider to the 400 square foot studio apartment. There was a back slider as well. The killer went into the back slider. He wanted to kill her quietly because there were people living in this little room, and there were people living where I'm standing right here in the main house across the yard. So he didn't want to cause any scene. He didn't want to have it be heard. So he thought, I'll bring the one weapon that I can do this crime with silently. And he decided to bring a garrote. Do you guys know what a garrote is? It's two wooden handles and wire in between that you use around someone's neck. In the fight, she was physical enough, and she was a very physical person, that she was able to get her hand up in the garrote and keep it from killing her. So he stabbed her to death. He didn't want to go that way, and she screamed, and he had to run out of there, and he ran out in a panic. That's the whole reason why he used the garrote to begin with. He wanted not to be heard. So in his panic, he left the garrote behind. He couldn't find it. She had rolled over on it. When we got there, we rolled her over, and the garrote was laying on the bed. And lucky for us, the officers who were there recognized that was probably going to be an important piece of evidence. I'll show you what it looked like. If you don't like blood, don't look. This was the garrote sitting on the bed. Now, they picked it up. Why? They recognized it was an artifact. Why did they recognize it was an artifact? I mean, there's that kind of wood was actually in the box spring and on the head post. Maybe it just broke off the bed. There was even that kind of wire probably in the bed spring. I don't know. Heck, there was a ficus tree sitting next to this is back in 1979. Remember ficus trees? This is an LA thing. Anyway, the point is, there's a ficus tree with a stick in the tree that had been wired to the ficus tree. Maybe just broke off that tree. No, they recognized this was something that they should collect. It was an artifact. It was a designed weapon. And of course, artifacts and designed weapons like this point to artisans and designers, don't they? Here's the second clip from from the Dateline episode. We did 4 of these episodes, but this is one from 1979.
He was alone in his makeshift workshop. Had to be, for what he intended. Carefully, he cut the lengths of a broom handle, 2 of them, just a few inches each. Sanded them down, drilled a hole in each one. Found a piece of wire, the string between them, too thin. He doubled it for strength. His perfect weapon for his perfect crime.
I think it was wise of them to collect this weapon because it showed signs of a designer. And I've thought about this quite a bit. Back when I was a designer, this is what it looked like in the 80s, as embarrassing as it is. Those are actually, as you can see, black and white checkered parachute pants. I wasn't alone. I was the only guy wearing these kinds of clothes, okay? That's a little red leather tie, working on a police and fire facility in Santa Barbara. But after designing a lot of different kinds of artwork, graphic design and architectural designs, just art, paintings, after having done a lot of these, I started to think about, well, why is it when you see any of my work, if you saw it on a table, you would immediately assume it didn't come about by way of physics or chance. You would assume there's an artist. Why? What is it about these works that tell you a designer is involved? What is it about this garrote that tells you a designer is involved? I started to think about it. I think it's a circumstantial, cumulative case, like all the cases I work, like what I'm going to teach you tomorrow when we look at the reliability of Scripture. And circumstantial, cumulative cases are built on many pieces of evidence that point to the same reasonable inference. I think there are 8 things that demonstrate that this has been designed. I gave it an acronym because of Frank Turek, who has to have everything in the form of an acronym. He's a friend of mine. I wish I hadn't done it because it's a stupid acronym, but I still did it anyway. It's designed. These are the 8 things that I think we see, and if you see these 8 things in any physical object, you can rightly conclude you've got a designer. Here, for example, we saw the garrote, and they asked themselves, gee, is there a chance that this could come up? What are the odds of this coming together by chance? Just by chance. You know, if you threw these things in a box or you shook the box, what are the odds this will come out? Doesn't look good. More reasonable that it's been designed. But not only that, they recognized this object because they had seen just a few years before The Godfather. And in The Godfather, there are 2 garrote murders. Do you remember this movie? And if you know something looks like something else you know is designed, and this looks just like the thing you know is designed, why would you not conclude that this is designed? So they collected it. A third thing, though, there's a certain amount of sophistication here. The actual kinds of knots were a sophisticated kind of knot that's used by boaters. Not likely to come about by accident. And not only that, it is informationally dependent. If you know something is informationally dependent, you've probably got a designer. And here, we did a search warrant on his house. It turns out there's only one group that I can find in history that has been trained to use and execute with garrotes. Do you know what it is? Don't ask me why this is the case, but it is. World War II Naval Aviators. Bizarre, huh? His dad was a World War II naval aviator. At his house, we found all of his naval aviator stuff, and our suspect had become a pilot and a sailor, and he was just like his dad. This is the one group that knows how to build garrotes. This is their training manual from World War II. And it's goal-directed. And look, if I was going to use a piece of wire to cut, let's say, wax or to cut clay or to cut cheese, I don't need to have wood handles on the end. I could just have loops because the pressure is not going to be that much. But if you got something where you see a handle on the end, that kind of tells you the goal this guy has in mind, right? It's tremendous pressure. He knew he'd cut his hands if he didn't have handles on that. So you know what the goal is by looking at it. Also, I can't think of a law of physics or chemistry that would bring these 3 things together in quite that way. These are only 3 pieces here. As a matter of fact, you might say it's irreducibly complex to 3. You know, mouse traps are irreducibly complex to 6. These are all the pieces of wire and wood that we found at his mother's house where he was living in 1979. She never threw anything away. And he was using #1 picture hanging wire. I became an expert in picture hanging wire for this case. And she would use #1. No one else uses that, by the way. It's only 2% of the picture hanging market. But she had it because she was a painter, and she kept it in her garage. And she also had wooden dowels that she would use in the sliding glass door. And he could destroy those, and nobody would even know because she kept these extra pieces of doweling. As a matter of fact, the doweling that we had on the garrote had specks of blue paint in the doweling. He sanded it off. And we found blue doweling in the garage. Irreducibly complex simply means that if you have to have 5 or 6 pieces together all at once before the thing will work, there's a good chance somebody has designed it that way. What are the odds these 5 or 6 things could come together naturally all simultaneously? Now here I only have 3 things, but that's enough for me to conclude it's designed. And finally, he had to make a choice, and it was obvious in his choice of garrote. He could have used all kinds of weapons, but these were all noisy weapons, loud weapons. He chose that weapon because he knew where he was going before he got there and knew he had to be quiet. Only a few people would even know that you had to be quiet there. In the end, this is the case that we are building for design. Now, I show you all of this, and I want to test it really quickly. I have a tree, a bougainvillea tree on my driveway next to my car. My cat loves this tree because in there is dinner, and he's constantly trying to get in that tree. Now, here's my question for you. Look at this nest, and you tell me, is that a natural occurrence? Did the wind just blow that in? Or is that intelligently designed? Did birds actually build that intelligently? That's my question for you. How would you know? Well, one way you could tell is to simply apply the template. Now, I could say reasonably here, I don't think it's driven by a book, a textbook. It's not informationally driven. Maybe I can't find any irreducible complexity. You will notice, though, the outside is structurally rigid. The inside is fine and soft. There's a purpose here. I can see the purpose of this thing. And it resembles bowls. I don't have all 8 attributes, but even with just 5, I can conclude there's a bird at work. Here, my point is you don't need all 8 to know its design. The more you have, the more obvious it is, but you don't need all 8. If you say, oh, I only see 5 things there, it couldn't be birds. Really? You're stupid. Okay, there's enough there. All right? Now, introduce Michael Behe, who's become a pretty good friend. He wrote a book years ago called Darwin's Black Box. He is a molecular biologist at Lehigh University, biochemist, I should say. And he's written this great book. It's stood the test of time over the last 20 years because he discovered what has become basically the poster child for the intelligent design movement, and that is a thing called a bacterial flagellum, bacteria that are motivated or actually made mobile by engines like this rotary engine that is built from proteins. 46 proteins that come together in this, that's not including the tail proteins, that's just for the motor proteins. The question, of course, is that micro machine, of which now we have discovered thousands, is that micro machine the product of natural causes? Let's take a look at it. Here it is, 46 proteins all assembled in a particular way. Is like the bird's nest, we have to ask this question. Is it a natural occurrence or is it intelligent design? How would we know? Well, you could apply the template. Are these 8 things here? Well, I think they are. What are the odds I could get this machine by chance? Just look at it. Do I need to even make the case for chance? If you look at this thing, can you see how unreasonable it is to suggest that those 46 and all that, the way it's moved is by electrical charge and rotation, like a rotary engine? Chance produced that? That's not a good explanation. Also, do you think it resembles anything else we know is designed? Yeah. It resembles rotary engines. Yet we were building rotary engines for 35 years before we ever discovered this one in 1978 inside the bacterial flagellum, inside the bacteria. Do you see the problem? If you know that the rotary engine in your car is designed, why would you deny this one? Also, it's pretty sophisticated. Not so much just the way the Legos go together, that's sophisticated enough. It's the charging system. It's this system that charges it. Even agnostic, atheist biologists will say this is like a miracle of the universe. But more than that, is it informationally dependent? Yeah. As a matter of fact, we know exactly now in the DNA what causes this machine to come together. It's being instructed by the code. It tells it how to assemble. So just like the book tells us how to build a garrote, there's a book inside this little organism called DNA that tells it how to build. That tale is, to me, is just remarkable in itself. How could we ever think that is, anyway. Is it goal-directed? Well, it is. I'll tell you why. Because the operational instructions of the DNA are very specific. The DNA will say, okay, start, do this, then wait, and then do this. Okay, then once that's built, then you build this. And then once that's built, then you build this. And it happens in small segments. And guess what? Once it's all done, the DNA stops talking. Like, okay, you reached the goal. Stop right there. That's good. Wow. So it doesn't go on randomly and we end up with this mutation. No, it is built from start to finish very specifically, and it appears the same in every single one. But not only that, do you think there's some natural law? And if all we had were physics, there's not even physics that would bring together the protein bases to form the Legos. If these Legos were floating around in water, they would never come together on the basis of any physics. And is it complex? Yeah. You have to have all of those pieces in place or it will not work. It'll just sit there. Remove one protein, it won't work. How do you get all of them in place at one time? And if it's evolution that did it, remember, evolution has to have a mutation, which creates an additional protein, which benefits the organism in some way so that it's passed on to its ancestor. And then another mutation. So you have to get from 0 into the 40s. And you have to show me what each one of those organisms, those little machines did from 0 to 40, and why it's not there anymore. As a matter of fact, there are like 9 proteins in this machine that don't exist anywhere else in the organism. And is it choice? Well, yeah, there's lots of ways to move critters like this. And each engine is slightly different. This engine is perfect, though, for what it does. So if you look at the kind of the plethora of different engines that could be employed, and there are many that are employed, there seems to be a choice about this one. So again, here we have our goal, and I think we see all 8 attributes of design. Even if you said, I don't agree with you, Jim, I don't see the goal direction you see. Okay, fine, take them out. You're still stuck with design. Look, if you walked out in your woods in the spring when it's all green again, and you were walking on a trail, and you came across an engine in the trail, would you say, wow, look what grows in these woods? No, you wouldn't. Why wouldn't you? Because even without thinking about it, you're applying this kind of innate sense of design you have, which I've just tried to make visual for you. These things point to design. But hey, forget about that for a second. Look at the trail. The trail is cut through here. Nothing grows in that little pathway. It's been kind of worn down too. And look, there's a concrete bunker here, a concrete post there. The trail exhibits attributes of design. It's a lot less complex than the motor, but I still know it's designed, even though it doesn't have all the pieces. I say all of this because even the most committed atheists like Richard Dawkins will agree that biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. And Dort gets it better, I think. Robert Dort says it this way: the apparent fit between organisms seems to suggest some higher intelligence at work, some supervisory gardener bringing harmony and color to the garden. So if you're going to explain this by staying inside the room, you do have a way you could do it. You're going to do it by some form of evolutionary processes. And typically what's been used to explain at least this one micro machine is something called co-option. This idea that the organism could borrow something a little less complex, in this case a type 3 secretion system, and then convert it into use as a motor. This has about 30 proteins in it. Do you see the problem with this thinking? That I can get from 30 to here. The problem is, how did I get to 30? The 30-piece object also has the attributes of design. Not only that, we've now done studies on these 2 organisms, and it turns out that this organism is actually older biologically than this organism. So now many biologists are saying, you know what? This one didn't evolve into this. That's pretty complex. This one devolved into this. Because it's easier to put those Legos in the drawer, the car in the drawer, and you shake it and it comes out in 50 pieces than it is to put 50 pieces in the drawer and shake it and get a car. Make sense? So if we're going to stay inside the room, they've only offered one possibility. That's some kind of co-option in evolution. But the problem with that, of course, is that there's no evidence for it. You can't show me the genetic pathway. You can't show me the pathway from 0 to 46. How did we get there? And that ignores the co-opted design. That thing's designed. Now, there's another way to get this. You know what it is. It's a designer. But then what do we have to do? We've got to jump outside the room again. Do you see the problem? Now we have a cosmic designer, and Denton puts it this way, that each constituent utilized by the cell for a particular biological role, each cog in the watch, turns out to be the only, at the same time, the ideal candidate for its role, is particularly suggestive of design. Moreover, there is simply no way that such prefabrication could be the result of natural selection. No kidding. But I could get it if there's an intelligent source for DNA that is creative and goal-directed, has a purpose, that is designing from outside the room. So when I look at this crime scene and I ask that simple question, And then I look, do I have good evidence of an intruder? Because I know that intruders change everything, right? And what I told you is that intruders turn that sense of, a crime scene into a death scene into a crime scene, but that sense of curiosity needs to change into a sense of urgency once you know you have an intruder. Well, we've now turned the corner and looked at the universe, and I think we've got a good reason. How do I explain those 8 things? The best explanation is outside the room for all 8. And that's what I do in the book. I spend the entire book just writing why all 8 are best explained by a designer outside the room. Now, I'll tell you something. I can get a suspect profile from this kind of work. Every time I walk into a death scene or to a murder, and I look at the evidence in the room, I know something about my killer before I ever meet him. You know that's true, right? If I have a murder and someone's been shot working behind the counter at a 7-Eleven, that's one kind of murder. If the same guy is killed, stabbed 30 times in his groin at home in his bed, different kind of murder. Would you agree? Different kind of suspect. Which of these 2 suspects probably knows my guy intimately? Second one, right? Now I've reduced the entire suspect pool down to a handful of people who would know him that intimately. So when I go to a crime scene, I look at the pieces of evidence in the crime scene, I develop a suspect profile. I think we can do that with these 8 pieces of evidence. And I'll tell you what, it's not Mick Jagger. Right? Because he doesn't have the attributes that are required to explain the 8 pieces. I'm looking for a non-spatial, non-temporal, non-material first cause that can design and fine-tune the entire universe for the existence of life. That is the source of intelligent information in DNA and the designer behind the designs we see in biology. There's a free agent mind that creates in its image other free agent minds like you and I, who is the source of all objective, transcendent moral truth and is even the source of good by which we would judge anything and call it evil. That's what I'm looking for. And Mick is not that guy. There is a suspect, though, of course, that would actually meet the description I've just discovered. And by the way, I've not stepped into Scripture to find this. I don't have a single verse of Scripture in the entire book. At the very end, I show how, you could actually, this looks like Yahweh. But I don't get you there by going through Scripture. This is the guy who killed my victim in 1979. He's older now. He was 27 on the day of the murder. He's now in his 60s. We convicted him on the basis of different forms of evidence. We had some eyewitnesses. We had some behaviors on his part that were suspicious. We had some forensic physical evidence. We actually had some statements he made that were suspicious. When you have different categories of evidence, we work eyewitness evidence, I'll show you tomorrow for the Gospels, very differently than we work behavioral evidence, different kinds of experts, different kinds of tools. We use different kinds of tools to do physical evidence. We use different kinds of tools to do a statement analysis. These are different kinds of tools. And when you have different forms of evidence that all point independently to the same suspect, good chance you have the right guy. Well, it turns out that when it comes to this case in the universe, we have 8 different kinds of evidence in 4 broad categories. 2 of them are entirely cosmological. We trust astrophysicists for this kind of information. 2 are entirely biological. Biochemists, biological engineers, these are the folks we trust for this. 2 are entirely mental. These are philosophers and neuroscientists. And 2 are moral. These are ethicists and philosophers. And it turns out that independently, they point to the same reasonable suspect. 4 different categories of evidence, same suspect. That's why this is an affirmative case. It's not a God of the gaps. I don't have an answer. That's why I choose God. No, I know I'm looking for an intelligent source of DNA. I don't have a lot of options. It's an affirmative case. It's not a gap case. Now look, I can tell you when you go to defense attorneys, I just did a case with Robert Shapiro, they will definitely do this to you. They'll say, I can think of 4 other ways to explain that evidence. And I can think of 3 other ways to explain that evidence. Let me just throw this out there and stick it on the wall. Come on, jury. I can think of lots of other ways to explain that evidence. Really? Well, it turns out this expert does not agree with this expert when he's trying to explain that evidence. He doesn't. And this guy does not agree with this guy. And nothing that he's using to describe the first piece of evidence over here is even in the same category that's being used over here. This guy does not agree with anything over here. Now, there's another way to explain this. Same 8 pieces of evidence. What if I could just give you one common causal suspect that could unify and explain all of the evidence? Which would you rather trust? This incredibly unlikely array of coincidences, or The one common causal suspect. This is how we win cases, folks. I hear all the time, there's even a movie recently, right? The Theory of Everything from Stephen Hawking, right? The theory of everything, an idea that we can somehow unify macro physics with quantum physics and have one unifying theory of everything. I'm here to tell you tonight, there is a theory of everything. It's called God. It is. That is the theory that unifies everything in the universe. So when I look back at these 8 pieces, I try to do the same thing we did in our crime scene, where I say, okay, how do I best explain this? I only got 2 ways to explain it. I looked at all 8 of those. You can't even go with number 1. I can't find unguided natural sources that can get me that stuff. Now, as I finish this with you tonight, I want to show you something I'm going to show you tomorrow. As I was working through the Gospels to determine whether or not they were reliable eyewitness accounts, I started to sketch out my case for the reliability of the Scripture, which I will show you tomorrow. This is what it looked like, though I'll show you in advance. I think we have a reliable account of Jesus in the New Testament, but I stopped short of believing. This gave me belief that, but not belief in. I still had a problem. I said, this person of Jesus, I believe what the Bible says, short of the miracles. Because I don't believe in miracles. I can believe everything else. But you want me to believe that what, he did all these miracles? He walked on water and healed people and rose from the dead? I'm out when it comes to that stuff. But then I had to ask myself, wait a minute, back up. Why am I so predisposed against supernatural causes or supernatural events? Let me look at my natural explanations for the stuff in the universe to make sure I had good footing. So I did this investigation I showed you tonight. And I realized, you know what? I don't have good natural explanations. I already believe in something that I can't explain inside the room. I got a cause of the universe that cannot be spatial, temporal, or material. In other words, the best explanation for those 8 things is an all-powerful, non-spatial, non-temporal, non-material first cause. The problem, of course, is that this stuff here, the space, time, and matter stuff, that's what we call nature. That's all that's in nature is space, time, and matter. If you're telling me there's a non-spatial, non-temporal, non-material first cause, that thing has to be extra-natural. You might even say it's supranatural. You might have to say it's supernatural. So if there is a being out there that is supernatural and all-powerful that can create the entire universe from nothing, that's a darn good miracle. And I bet you if he can do this, he can do the other stuff. And I realized I've had a bias against the supernatural that was unwarranted. And the last piece of the puzzle clicked in for me. Remember I told you that you have to have your sense of curiosity transformed into a sense of urgency? Jurors all the time will say, hey, you know what? We don't allow juries to do this. We don't allow juries to say, you know, he looks really guilty. But there could appear evidence 5 years from now that will show he's not guilty. So I can't decide he's guilty. Really? Okay, you're not allowed to do that. Either you do or you don't have enough. You cannot say, I don't have enough. Maybe I have enough now, but maybe it'll change. No. That's not right thinking. If you have enough now, you have enough now. Have a sense of urgency about it. Oh, the science might change on this, Jim. Someday we might have an explanation for this stuff. Great. Change your mind then. You've got enough reason right now to decide if God exists. If there are some of you who are in this room because your parents make you come to church, or your spouse makes you come to church. Well, I get it. I did that for a lot of years. Have a sense of urgency, though. Jurors are called to make a decision. Ask yourself honestly, do you think there's not enough evidence, or do you just not want there to be enough evidence? Which is it, really? Tomorrow I'll show you why you can take the entire step across the line with Jesus. But I just want at first at least you to realize that all of us believe in something extranatural. All of us, whether you're an atheist or not. You believe in some uncaused first cause outside of space, time, and matter. What if that first cause is personal? Wouldn't that change everything? I will send you all this stuff from our website. This is the one picture you can take that you should take. This is the place where you're going to get the resources. You can't go there today. I'll set it up tomorrow. It's coldcasechristianity.com/resources. That'll have a link, and I'll send you everything we talk about this week. And yes, I'm selling books. I've got to get rid of those. I'm going to give those to you for $10 each. You won't find that price anywhere. I'll be happy to sign them. But if you don't have $10, no worries. I'm not here to sell you a book. You don't need that book. I'm going to send you this stuff. But I'll be happy to sign a book if you want. Let's pray. Father, we love you and we know there's a lot to learn. And a lot of times I'm just overwhelmed by the stuff I don't know. But I also know you've given me enough. Enough that no one has an excuse. And Father, I also know that you are the power in this room, not me, not this case on the wall, not the person who's even listening to the case. You have all the power. So I ask you now to move in this room and to move people to decision who haven't made a decision yet, and to bring them back here tomorrow so we can keep on talking about the things that matter most. And we pray this in the name of your precious Son, Jesus Christ. And everyone here says, amen. Amen. Thanks, guys.
How about a big hand for our speakers, both of them? Let's show our appreciation.
To hear more from J. Warner Wallace, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For more information on this week's topic, visit youtube.com/coldcasechristianity with J. Warner Wallace. Thank you for joining us on this Cold Case Christianity broadcast.